After losing his wife, Brandon was shattered, a broken man, failing at work, struggling at home, and losing touch with his only daughter. Life made no sense. Then he met a Nigerian woman. Did things get worse? What happened next will keep you wondering. Get ready for a roller coaster of pain, healing, and unexpected love. This is Bella's story time. Brandon was a shattered man. His life had taken an unexpected turn with just one sad event. Nothing seemed the same again. He blamed his woes on himself, wished that day never existed, wished that day never came. He wished he didn't have to make that call. Maybe, just maybe, Sheila, his darling wife, would still be alive. It had been 2 years and 6 months, and still, Brandon wasn't mentally stable. He felt he owed his daughter, Lily, the responsibility of giving her a good life, but his mental health was failing him. He couldn't shake off the guilt, the constant ache of losing Sheila, the woman who had been his rock. They had built Trans-Afrique, one of the biggest tech companies in Korea, together. Sheila had been there from the start. She was the one who brought him food when he had nothing, who loaned him money for job interviews, who encouraged him to start his own company. And now she was gone, just like that, leaving Brandon broken. His grief had affected his business, costing him deals, and most of all, it affected Lily. She had been only 6 when Sheila died, and ever since, she had been left in the hands of caregivers who she never bonded with, crying herself to sleep every night. Brandon tried to find love again, but it never worked. Hannah, the first lady he met, couldn't handle Lily's presence, and Gogo was just there for the good life, which Lily despised. It seemed like no one could fill the void Sheila left. Esther's career at Chevy Data Consulting was taking off, but things were not easy. She was a senior data analyst, and her brilliance had earned her respect. A graduate of the University of Ibadan, Esther was not just talented, she was driven. She had won numerous accolades, including the prestigious scholarship to study in the United Kingdom, and now, in Korea, she had become a star employee. But there was tension at work. Madame Nari, Esther's superior, felt threatened by her success. Esther was everything. Nari wasn't ambitious, focused, and loved by her colleagues. Nari's jealousy was obvious, but Esther chose to ignore it and work hard, winning Best Employee of the Month twice in a row. One evening, after working late on a presentation which Madame Nari insisted she submitted the next day, even when the presentation was next week, Esther's car keys went missing. Frustrated and exhausted, she decided to walk out of the office and grab a taxi. But fate had other plans. She stumbled upon a car accident and, without thinking, rushed to help the man inside. He was alive, but clearly in shock. "Please, take me home," the man pleaded, showing her his address. Esther did just that, driving him to his house and making sure he was settled. With no other options, she stayed the night in his home, unknowingly setting the stage for a life-changing encounter. The next morning, Brandon woke up with a headache, not remembering how he had gotten home. Stepping into his living room, he froze. His daughter, Lily, was laughing and playing with a woman he didn't recognize. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice thick with confusion. Esther smiled warmly. "I was the one who brought you home last night." Brandon's surprise turned to gratitude as Esther explained how she had found him after his drunken night, helping him home and making sure he was okay. All he could remember was that he went to club. Whatever transpired after that still remains a mystery. What struck him was how Lily had taken to Esther so quickly. It was the first time in months that Lily had bonded with someone, and that made Brandon pause. Over the next few weeks, Esther and Brandon spent more time together. Their connection grew stronger, not just because of the bond they shared with Lily, but because of the emotional healing Brandon desperately needed. Esther found herself caring for him, not just out of kindness, but because of a deeper connection. She saw through his grief, understanding the pain he carried. Esther began staying over more often. Initially, it was just for dinner, but then it turned into movie nights with Lily. Sometimes, Lily would beg Esther to read her bedtime stories, and on one of those nights, Esther found herself telling Lily a story she had loved as a child. It was about a brave princess who helped her father, the king, rebuild their kingdom after it was lost to war. Lily hung on every word, looking up at Esther with adoration, as if Esther's very presence was a comfort. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Brandon invited Esther to dinner again. They were sitting at the kitchen table, eating a simple pasta dish Brandon had prepared himself, when the conversation turned to more personal matters. "I didn't think I could ever get back to being happy, you know," Brandon said, his voice quiet. "When Sheila passed away, I was convinced I would never smile again. I pushed everyone away, even Lily, in a way. But you've been different." Esther reached across the table and placed her hand on his. "You don't have to carry that burden alone, Brandon. I'm here." Brandon was silent for a moment, his eyes softening as he looked at her. "I don't know what it is about you, Esther, but every time I'm with you, I feel like I can breathe again. It's strange, but it feels right." She smiled warmly. "I think it's because you're allowing yourself to heal. That's all anyone can do." Later that week, Esther and Brandon went on a walk together. It was a chilly evening, and they walked side by side, the sound of their footsteps echoing in the quiet streets. As they passed by a park, they saw a group of children playing soccer. Brandon stopped for a moment, watching them with a distant expression. "I used to play soccer with my brother," Brandon said, his voice almost a whisper. "We were good, but that was before all of this, before life happened." Esther noticed the shift in his tone. She could tell he was thinking of his past, of the life he'd once had. "You still have that spark in you, you know," Esther said softly. "Maybe you can find something like that again, something that brings you joy." Brandon looked at her, surprised by the sincerity in her words. He smiled faintly. I think you're right. Maybe I've just been too focused on the past." As they continued walking, Brandon reached over and took her hand. The gesture was simple, yet it felt so significant. It wasn't a romantic gesture just yet, but it was something real. The next few days, Esther found herself feeling drawn to Brandon in ways she hadn't expected. She admired his quiet strength and his vulnerability. She had never seen him as someone broken, just someone who needed time to heal. She saw in him a man who had been through unimaginable loss, but still had the capacity for love. One evening, as they were sitting in the living room, Lily fell asleep on the couch after watching a movie. Brandon and Esther were left alone, the soft hum of the television filling the silence. "Lily seems to really like you," Brandon said, breaking the silence. "I've never seen her so happy with someone else before." Esther smiled. "I like her too. She's a special little girl. She reminds me of my younger self, always looking for comfort." Brandon chuckled lightly. "She's been through a lot. I feel like I'm failing her sometimes, you know? She deserves a better life than this." Esther turned to face him. "You're doing your best, Brandon. Don't beat yourself up. She sees your love for her, and that's enough." Brandon's gaze softened, and for the first time in a long while, he allowed himself to believe that things could get better. He realized he wasn't just talking about his daughter, but also about his own future. Could he really move forward? Could he let someone else in? "I don't know how to thank you, Esther. You've been so patient with me with Lily," he said, his voice thick with emotion. Esther shrugged, her eyes meeting his. "There's nothing to thank me for. I'm here because I want to be, and I care about both of you." They sat there in silence, but it wasn't awkward. It was a peaceful silence, the kind that comes when two people don't need to say anything more because they understand each other. The next weekend, Brandon invited Esther to join him and Lily for a day out. He had decided to take them to the zoo. Lily was ecstatic when she found out, and Esther was eager to see a different side of Brandon, the side that was a father, not just a grieving widower. At the zoo, Lily dragged them from exhibit to exhibit, asking endless questions about the animals. Brandon was laughing more than he had in a long time, and Esther couldn't help but feel grateful for this time, this moment where everything felt so normal. As they sat on a bench, watching Lily feed some ducks by the pond, Esther leaned in slightly. "Is this how you used to be?" she asked, her voice gentle. "Before everything changed?" Brandon looked out at Lily, his expression thoughtful. I used to be carefree, happy, full of life. But that was before Sheila passed. Now, I'm just trying to find my way back. Esther nodded. You will, Brandon. You're not alone anymore. There was a long pause, and for the first time, Brandon realized something. He was no longer just going through the motions. He was living again, and it was because of Esther. Later that evening, as they all sat down for dinner, Lily, with her usual sweetness, asked, Daddy, when are you going to marry Auntie Esther? Brandon froze, his fork halfway to his mouth. He glanced at Esther, who blushed but smiled. The question had caught him off guard. Lily, he began slowly. We're not quite there yet, but I think she's very special. What do you think of her? Lily beamed. She's nice. I like her. Brandon chuckled. His heart warmed by the simple exchange. Esther couldn't help but smile too, realizing that this little girl had just unknowingly sealed her place in Brandon's life. They weren't just two strangers anymore. They were a family in the making. The connection between them had shifted from something tentative to something real. It was still fragile, still new, but it was undeniable. And as the weeks passed, Brandon found himself looking at Esther not just as someone who helped him heal, but as someone he wanted to share the rest of his life with. The peaceful bond they shared soon faced its first challenge. Brandon, after seeing how well they worked together, suggested that Esther leave her job at Chevy Data to join Transafrique. I want you here, with me, he said one evening, as they sat together in the living room after a long day. Esther's eyes widened in surprise. What do you mean here? What are you asking me to do? Brandon's tone softened, trying to explain. I want us to build something together. We work so well together. I've seen what you can do, and I don't want to be alone in this. I need you by my side. Esther, taken aback, stared at him in disbelief. But Brandon, I've worked so hard to get where I am. I've built my career, my reputation. I can't just leave that behind to work with you. This isn't just about us anymore, it's about what I've accomplished on my own. Brandon grew defensive, his words coming out sharper than he intended. I'm not asking you to give it up. I just want us to build something together, but I don't want to do it alone. Isn't that what a partnership is about? Sharing the load? Taking on the challenges together? Esther stood up, feeling the weight of his words, but also the frustration building within her. That's not fair, Brandon. I'm not your employee, and I'm certainly not your late wife. I'm not here to fulfill some void in your life or your business. I have my own career, my own dreams. I can't just walk away from all that for you or for anyone. The tension in the room grew, and Brandon's face fell. He hadn't meant for it to come out like that, but the damage had been done. They didn't speak for days, both nursing their wounds in silence. Days later, Brandon found himself wandering through the park, aimlessly lost in his thoughts. His phone buzzed in his pocket. It was Esther. I know we haven't been talking much lately, but I've been thinking maybe we need to talk about our expectations of each other. And maybe I was too quick to shut you down. But I also think you need to understand that I'm not just your partner at work. I'm not going to disappear, but I need to keep something of myself too. Let's meet tonight. Brandon stood still for a moment. A flood of emotions hit him. He hadn't meant to push her away. This wasn't just about work. It was about him needing to feel whole again, but he had unintentionally put too much pressure on Esther to fill that void. That evening, they met at the small cafe near Brandon's office. The air between them was thick with unspoken words. I didn't mean to make you feel like you had to give up your career for me, Brandon said, his voice quiet. I don't want you to feel trapped in a relationship where you have to sacrifice your dreams. I guess I just felt so lonely. Losing Sheila, building a business alone, and now I've found something good again, someone who makes me feel like I can breathe again. Esther listened, her heart softening as she understood the deeper layers of his grief. Brandon, I know what it's like to lose something, to feel lost in your own life. I've been there too. But you can't expect me to put my life on hold. I'm not here to be your second choice or a replacement. I want us to be equals. I'm sorry, Brandon whispered, regret filling his eyes. I didn't realize how much pressure I was putting on you. You're right. You deserve more than just being someone who fills the gaps in my life. Esther reached across the table, placing her hand over his. I know you didn't mean it that way, but I had to speak up. You're not alone anymore, Brandon. I'm here because I care, but I need to live too. The two of them sat in silence for a moment, each trying to come to terms with their emotions. The tension slowly melted away as they began to understand each other's perspectives. Days passed, and though their professional tension still lingered, something shifted between them. They both began to put in more effort to understand each other's boundaries and dreams. One day, Esther surprised Brandon by calling a meeting at Transafrique to discuss a new project she had been working on at Chevy Data. I've been thinking about the proposal you mentioned, she said confidently. Maybe I can't drop everything for Transafrique right now, but there's a way for us to collaborate without me compromising my career. Brandon listened closely as she presented her ideas. He could feel a shift in the way they interacted. No longer was she just the woman he needed to help him heal. She was now an equal partner in more ways than one. Weeks passed, and Esther's company, Chevy Data, was nominated to pitch for a major contract with Transafrique. Brandon was tasked with reviewing the proposals, and when he saw Esther's name, he couldn't help but smile. He didn't want to let her go, but he knew her capabilities were undeniable. On the day of the pitch, Esther presented with confidence, dazzling Brandon and the entire panel. Madame Nari had tried to sabotage the presentation by handing Esther the wrong slides, but Esther noticed in time and corrected it smoothly. Her brilliance shone through, and the contract was awarded to Chevy Data. Afterward, Brandon found her alone in the lobby, looking exhausted but proud. You did it, Esther, he said, his voice sincere. You mean we did it? She replied with a smile. And for the first time in weeks, Brandon felt a sense of peace. Esther was now in charge of leading the project, and immediately, Madame Nari started reporting to her. With the successful deal in hand, Esther's role in Transafrique became official, making her not only Brandon's colleague but also his superior in some aspects of the business. But there was no animosity. Esther wasn't trying to steal his shine. They worked together as equals. She respected his vision, and he admired her intelligence. As their professional relationship grew, so did their personal one. One day, Lily came running into the office, calling Esther Mummy. Brandon's heart melted. He had never imagined this a second chance at happiness with the woman who had healed him and brought joy to his daughter's life. On the day of their wedding, Brandon visited Sheila's grave, his heart heavy with emotions. He whispered, "Thank you for everything. I'll always love you, but I'm ready to be happy again. I think you'd love Esther too." As he stood beside Esther at the altar, Lily holding their hands, he realized that this was the life he had always dreamed of, a second chance at love, family, and happiness. "I love you," Brandon whispered to Esther, his voice full of emotion. "I love you too," Esther replied, tears brimming in her eyes. And for the first time in years, Brandon felt whole again.